I would eat one, but you're watching, so I won't do that. Welcome to Cooking with Wall Street English. We're going to make some buttermilk pancakes today, which is a major tradition in North America. My name is Nancy. So we're going to get started with which tools we're going to be using in the kitchen. We have our whisk, our wooden spoon, our spatula, knife to cut the butter, we'll see that a little later on, our measuring jar for liquids, measuring cups for dry ingredients, measuring spoons, a little whisk, and this type of knife that we're going to use to level off the dry ingredients, and our bowl. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to take a look at our ingredients. We're going to have some flour. I'll tell you the amounts in a little while. We're going to have some sugar. We're going to have 2 eggs, butter, salt, baking powder, baking soda, milk, regular milk, and we're going to be using, normally we would have buttermilk, but we're going to use something that is a very good substitute. It is lait fermenté. So it's a fermented milk. We're going to start off by measuring our dry ingredients. So in order to measure our dry ingredients, we're going to be using our measuring cups. These are American measuring cups, but we will be giving you the ingredients in grams and the metric system, so don't worry. Okay, the recipe calls for 2.5 cups of flour, okay? So to make it easy, I'm gonna use half cups, so I'm gonna need 5. So what I like to do is just dig right in there, and using a knife, simply, I'm going to pat down the flour and really get it out there. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're making a little bit of a mess, and 5. So this is really going to give us a really good base. So that's 2.5 cups of flour, just basic all-purpose flour. All right, next we can put them in any order. I'm going to go with the sugar. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of sugar. So, it doesn't really matter. I don't have to be precise because it really depends on how sweet. It won't really change it. So I'm going to just put 2 tablespoons of sugar. All right. So next, I'm going to go for baking soda and baking powder. This is going to help the pancake rise. So for this, here I'm going to be a little bit more precise. I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Just going to scoop it up, and with my leveler, once again, I'm going to level it off. There you go, 1 tablespoon. Okay. And just so I don't pour too much, I'm going to pour it into a bowl. This is baking soda. Has some spillage. Just gonna level that off as well. And 1 tablespoon of baking soda. Now, because we are going to be using butter that has no salt in it, and you have to be very careful about that, we're going to be using salt in this recipe. And here I'm using fleur de sel. I really like this, it gives a nice flavor. So here I'm going to put 1.5 tablespoons. You might think that's a lot, but the butter doesn't have any salt. So that was 1. And now I'm going to put half a teaspoon. There we go. And in terms of my dry ingredients, I'm ready to mix. Okay, so we're going to just mix the dry ingredients with a whisk. Just want to make sure that we evenly mix everything because we did put a tablespoon and a half of salt. So we don't want certain pancakes to be more salty than others. And we also really want to make sure that the baking soda and the baking powder are evenly distributed so that we have an even rise in all the pancakes. Okay, so that seems pretty good. So we're going to measure the butter out. Normally it's 10 tablespoons of butter, but it's a little bit messy to measure tablespoons of butter out. So we're going to measure in grams. So it's going to equal out to 140 grams. So what we can do, what I like to do is just put a little foil, and we're just going to cut our butter, and it's cold butter, just came out of the fridge. So you don't even have to leave it out for room temperature. And we're just going to cut, and to make it easier to heat it up after, we're just going to cut it up into little cubes. There we have beautiful cubes of butter for our pancake recipe. It might seem like a lot of butter, but you really do need it because it's going to give you a lot of flavor. And it's also going to avoid the pancakes sticking to the pan when you're cooking the pancakes. And you're going to see you don't want to cut the butter. It won't be too much. It'll be just perfect. So we just need 40 more grams. And ooh, perfect. We're at 144 grams, but I think that will be okay. Right. So basically, now we're just going to put it in a pot. Okay, I have a little pot here, and we're just going to melt the butter down on a very low temperature. You don't want it to boil or burn. You really want to keep it on a very minimum level, a minimum temperature. So we're just going to stick all the butter inside here, and we can see that the butter is really chopped up in little cubes. This is going to allow for a faster melting of the butter, so it won't take as much time, and it will allow it to cook it slowly. Now our butter is melted. We're going to mix the liquid ingredients inside. We're going to mix it while it's still warm because we don't want the butter to curdle up because the milk is cold. So we want to make sure that it's still warm, so it's going to allow a nice even liquid texture in the pancakes. So what we're going to do is grab our measuring jar, and we're going to measure 125 milliliters of milk, which equals half a cup of milk. All right. So now, you just have to be very careful. Perfect. Okay. And what I'm going to do is break the eggs. I have 2 eggs here, and we're going to break it, but we're going to separate the yolks from the whites. The yolk is the yellow part. We're going to use everything, but we're going to see that it's done in steps. So we're going to put the yolk, which is the yellow part, inside the milk. And our second egg, whoops. And we're just going to dump that in there. And now, we're just going to put the whites aside for now. We're going to use a little mini whisk or a fork. That's fine too if you don't have a mini whisk. Okay, so we're just going to mix it into butter. Okay, mixing. And that's a beautiful yellow color. Now we're going to mix our fermented milk or buttermilk. If you are in America or in Canada, you would easily find buttermilk, but you will not easily find buttermilk at all in France. So great substitute is fermented milk, but please don't substitute it with normal milk. Fermented milk is going to have a natural reaction with the baking soda and the baking powder. So we want to make sure that we're using the right ingredients. And on top of that, it's going to give a beautiful flavor to our buttermilk pancake. We can find this milk in any aisle in a big grocery store, even small grocery stores. We will find this in the fresh milk section and the butter section. So it's always good to know. Okay, here we only need 500 milliliters, so half a liter of buttermilk or fermented milk. So I'm just going to turn this around. Easily measured out, 500 milliliters, perfect. And then I'm going to just mix it in to our egg, butter, and milk mixture. I can smell that. You will smell that fermented milk does smell different. It's normal, it's good. Some people might think that the milk turned a bit. No, it's perfectly normal that it has a fermented smell. Okay, so this is what we're gonna look at. And as we can see, we have the butter that's evenly mixed with the milk, despite the fact that the milk was cold. So this is very important that your butter is still warm when we do mix it in. Okay, now we're gonna get ready to mix the liquid ingredient inside the dry ingredients. And here, we're not gonna use a whisk, we're gonna use a wooden spoon. Okay, so we're just gonna mix the liquid ingredient. And as you can see, don't worry about it too much. If you're mixing it slow, you're gonna see that it doesn't evenly mix in the beginning. And you might think, oh my, you see it has little clumps? Don't worry, that's normal. We're gonna keep mixing. We're gonna mix it until, don't overmix, but we're gonna mix it until most of the dry ingredients are mixed in. And then we're going to mix in our egg whites. So you're gonna see that it's quite thick. This is normal, you didn't do anything wrong. It's normal. Buttermilk pancakes are going to be thicker than maybe some other pancake recipes you've tried before. Another thing to note here, once we put the egg whites in, we're going to get this weird texture. Don't worry. It's going to be all normal once we've mixed in the egg whites. Just have to evenly mix them. And the wooden spoon is the best thing to mix it in. Okay, perfect. So now you're gonna see that your batter, your pancake batter, might seem a little thick, but that's normal. We're gonna see how this cooks up very nicely. So at this step, you have done nothing wrong. Please do not add any more milk or fermented milk into this recipe. That is done. Now we're gonna get ready to cook some pancakes. One important thing to note is that we have to let the batter sit for about 5 minutes. That's what we've already done while we were heating up our plate. We can use a frying pan and cook it on a stovetop, or use one of these that will allow us to have several pancakes on here. So what I like to do, I like to use a measuring cup so that I can have the same size pancakes. So that you can use a scooper, you can use a spoon, whatever you like. But I like to have the same amount of batter because I like to maintain the same size for each pancake. So let's get started. Now I also want you to notice that the first pancakes are never going to be perfect. okay? Because sometimes we will have to adjust the temperature of our oven, our stovetop, or our little heating pad here. And as you can see, they're very thick. This is normal. This is the consistency we want in our buttermilk pancakes. They're gonna spread out a little bit, so don't worry about like spreading them out too much. If you'd like, you can take the back of the measuring cup to flatten them a bit, but you don't have to. You can see how I am using this. Okay, now we just have to wait and let them cook a little bit. Okay, and I will show you as well when you know it's ready to flip over. Because we know it's going to be ready to flip over because we're going to have little bubbles that form. And that is the reaction of the baking powder and baking soda with the fermented milk as well. All right, so we're going to wait a little while. This is the hardest part because we can smell the nice pancake smell. However, we can't eat them yet. And we're going to use a spatula. I like to use this sort of spatula because I'm used to it, but you can use any spatula you have at home. Maybe not the wooden spatulas because they're quite thick and it's hard to get underneath the pancake. So you want to use a metal, obviously a metal spatula that doesn't scratch non-stick surfaces. Be careful with that. So now we're just going to, as you can see, some of the pancakes have joints together. That's okay. We're going to separate them before we flip it over. Don't worry, there's a solution to everything. Okay, so we can see some reactions here, top bubbles that are starting. And I can hear the little sizzling sound of my pancakes cooking underneath, and that's because of the butter that I have in the recipe. I did not put any butter on the non-stick pan surface. We don't need to. Depending on your frying pan or the surface you choose to use, you might choose to put just a little bit of butter on the bottom. Here we're starting to get a nice bubble reaction. And we can see that the pancake is ready to flip over when we start seeing the cooked surfaces, but I'm going to show you as well how we can just kind of test and look underneath. So as you can see, the pancake is growing and the edges are starting to get cooked. It doesn't look so liquidy and raw. So yeah, and even the color slightly changing. So that's how you're gonna know if the pancake is ready to flip over. And then you're gonna get to know your stove top temperature and the frying pan and the material you use. You're gonna get used to it, so it's not a problem. Oh, these ones are stuck, but haha, I'm gonna be able to flip them over. Oop. No, these are little silly pancakes that don't wanna separate. Oh, we're gonna have some accidents, I think. Ooh, some nice color. I'm just gonna wipe off my spatula so the next pancakes don't stick to my spatula here. I'm gonna choose a different angle. Let me see. Okay, great. All right, I'm gonna have some separation. Maybe next time I'll put less pancakes on the pan to avoid that they stick together. And maybe I will turn up the temperature a little bit higher. I'm gonna wipe that off. Ooh, nice flip. Okay. And as we can see, we have a nice ooh, we had an accent there, that's okay. We had even tops, but this is because they came together a little bit. That won't work, that won't be a big deal. Okay, let me turn that up a little bit. So like I said in the beginning, the first pancakes, maybe they're not gonna be the prettiest, but they'll still taste delicious. So I'll keep cooking. It smells really nice here. I would eat one, but you're watching, so I won't do that. Okay, let's take a look. Well, see, it's still undercooked. We want to get the same color. And sometimes be careful because you'll see that, nice and fluffy. Nice and fluffy, but we have to be careful of them not being too undercooked. We'll put that on the side. We're gonna eat it because we don't wanna waste any food. And as we can see, this pancake is still a little raw. Those were some of the last ones we put onto the sheet. Oh, that's a little bit better. I'm gonna leave it on a little bit more. I did turn up my temperature setting a little bit. There we go. See, we have a nice even color on the other side. It's a little hot. Okay. Our pancake is ready to be eaten. We're going to use some maple syrup. And we can find maple syrup in any store, in any grocery store. It's quite easy to find. It's now more available in France than it was maybe like 10 years ago. So I'm going to just pour. You can put a little bit, or maybe you want to try it without the maple syrup. But of course, I like to put a lot of maple syrup. And as we can see, you're gonna have a nice fluffy texture. Okay, and we can dip our pancake in the syrup and eat. Bon appetit.